So I want to show you the results from the reports that HSE has been gathering in. So over the past 2 years, our inspectors have been specifically asking duty holders if they've got a third-party noise report, and then collecting that for us at HSE. It's been sent off to our science division, and they have then looked at those reports to check the quality of them in terms of how good the reports are, how well they would help the duty holder understand what their risks are and understand what they should do. Uh, what you're about to see isn't the most encouraging thing that you'll ever see. And I'm not showing you it in order to make you feel bad or guilty about yourself. And I think you probably, as BOHS members, shouldn't feel bad or guilty about yourself, because you're the ones that are holding up the end in terms of making sure people are getting half decent reports. But you will see some information here on what people are getting wrong and what we would kind of hope can be done to try and get it right. So I'll start off just by showing you the overall results, and about 59% of the reports that we'd looked at, it was a sample size of about 70 reports. About 59% of them were below the standard at which we would say this is satisfactory. The next sort of graph you can see there is giving you an indication of how many were very good. Well, none of them were very good in the ones that we saw, or very few were rather, and how many are sort of unsatisfactory. So there's that kind of line there. I could now spend the next sort of 20 minutes just giving you nothing but graphs. But what I'll try and do is give you a wee bit of a story behind the types of things that we're seeing, so you could get a feel for it. But also to give you a maybe hopefully a sense that well, at least I'm not that bad, because these are the things that we are genuinely seeing people do. So, the question I would ask you is, where would you put a noise dose badge? Would you put it on someone's shoulder, on the person, to get their dose for noise? Or would you place it on a piece of machinery? Because we have seen people placing dose badges on noisy bits of equipment. What would you use to do your sound level measurements? Would you use a sound level meter, or would you use a mobile phone? Because we continually see phones being used. I'm not hugely happy about that. If you are going to do measurements, how would you do those sound level measurements? Would you do it at the worker's position with your microphone as close to the worker's ear as is practical? Or would you just simply park your meter on a tripod in the middle of the factory unit in the hope that that will be indicative of what is going on? When you come to do your measurements, are you going to be there all the time that the equipment is running? Or are you simply going to put a statement in saying, the banding machine was not in operation at the time when the noise survey was undertaken, and the noise levels may be higher than what they've measured? Now, that is a real significant risk for a consultant to go down that route. I understand it's not always easy to get the noise levels that you want and get the measurement data that you want, and have the duty holder make sure everything's running. But it does present a particular risk, which I'll come back to later on as we go through this. I would really hope that none of you are using this method of calculating the daily exposures, because this is not right. We pointed out to this particular individual that this wasn't right. They agreed, and rather than go away and use our calculator, which is free to use and online, they reran all these calculations and came back and said, yes, we were right, the numbers were incorrect, and that we'd actually rounded it, and it should be 77.0 and not 78.0, whatever. But that is definitely not the way to calculate daily exposures. Do you disagree or agree with this statement? I always tell employers that they don't need to provide health surveillance if they issue hearing protection, because it puts them below the upper exposure action value. That is what a consultant has said to us. They have been working for 20 years doing that. So the entirety of the time the regulations have been in force. That isn't right. Just for clarity, it isn't the most obvious thing in the regulations the way that they're written, but it is written in the regulations in 4.5 that you apply the exposure limit value, but not in applying the lower and upper exposure action values would you take account of hearing protection. So in determining whether the regulations apply and whether you're above the lower or upper action value, you do not apply any adjustment because people are wearing hearing protection. Do you agree or disagree with this? It's not reasonable for the defendant to have only considered the HSE's guidance because it only reduces the noise by a level of at most 10 dB. 10 dB is a pretty decent reduction in noise, and you would question whether that's something that somebody should be overlooking. So, who's doing workplace noise surveys? What's wrong with the workplace noise surveys? And what 8 things could you do about that? Well, who's doing them? Well, we looked at the qualifications of the people, or the stated qualifications in the report, and we found that about 47% were not providing any information on what their qualifications were at all. Of the ones who were providing qualifications, BOHS members were far and away the biggest cohort, but they were second to the people giving us no information. There was a few people with combined, very small number with combined qualifications, maybe IOSH and BOHS. Not a lot of IOE members doing it, probably around about just under about 10. And I think that might be reflected in some of the graphs you see later on. But when we actually look at the people who they didn't give any professional details on who they were and whether it was satisfactory, we were finding that about 83% of the consultants who gave no information on the qualifications were given unsatisfactory reports. Obviously now you're thinking, well, what is it for BOHS members? Well, you can breathe a reasonable sigh of relief here, because 71% of the reports that we looked at by BOHS members were at the satisfactory or better, okay or better level. So that's pretty good. I think that's, sometimes there'll be an element of, well, what were they actually asked to do? But fundamentally, in terms of what we're looking for, it feels like the message is getting through. Maybe some work to do with the IOA, although again, I treat that with kit gloves because it's a very small sample size that we were looking at for IOA members. What is it that we're looking for? Well, it's on your website. It's that template. It's probably worth saying this, and I say this every time I mention it, that's essentially sets out the key areas that HSE would like to see in third-party noise reports. So the sort of things that people would pay for, not necessarily the sort of thing the duty holder might do themselves. The other thing to remember is it's not a blow-by-blow, you must do every single thing in this in exactly the way that it's written type guide. It is something to give you as professionals an idea of what sections that you would include in your own report and what information justifies you as saying this is a good quality report. If you want to do more, if you want to do slightly different things, I don't have a huge issue with that. I'm not even expecting to have it laid out in the same way. It's what works for you, as long as you feel that your reports are covering those types of issues. And when we assess reports, that is what we effectively assess it against. So what's wrong with the workplace noise survey reports? What are the things that we're seeing? So our researchers split this up into different categories. And within each category, there's an overall result, and then a bit more meat on the bone, a bit more information as to what people were getting wrong and right. So when we look at things like measurement issues, well, we found out that selection of the measurement position, about half of the people were getting that wrong. So that again is leaving meters lying in the middle of the room. There was a lot of poor work around about referencing measurement standards. To be fair, there aren't a lot of standards for you to reference, but we would at least expect you to see that you're referencing the information and the guidance that's given in L108 and following that where it's practical to do so. Selection and description of measurement period, that is coming back to that idea of they're not running that machine, so I've not measured it, or doing very short measurements rather than doing something that's indicative of the entire working day. And about 60% of the reports we were having issues with that. Now, I mentioned earlier on that this is a potential issue for consultants, and this is where we fall into this section 3 of the health and safety at work requirements, where you have got a duty to ensure that, so far as reasonably practical, the persons not in your employment who may be affected by your work are not exposed to risk. So if you have an instance where you've decided or made a decision not to measure something which is noisy that you probably should have, and it's, you've made that decision, it's not something you didn't have any control over, that has got the potential to create a risk for the employee, because they are then exposed to higher levels of noise and they may have been told they don't need to wear hearing protection, or this isn't the hearing protection zone off the basis of the advice that somebody could give them. So if you give advice and the advice then potentially creates a risk, then that is you falling into a situation where you may be breaching section regulation 3.1. Now, when we look at advice issues or advice that's been issued, overall, we're finding about half of the information on hearing protection is pretty good. Most consultants are making calculations on hearing protection performance, and that's quite encouraging that that's been done. I think when we first started this, we were worried that hearing protection calculations weren't being done. It looks like it's not as bad as we had expected. When we look at information on hearing protection, are you giving advice on hearing protection zones? Reports were pretty strong on that. The advice on fit and wear of hearing protection was slightly lower, but then that isn't necessarily always something that is asked for, and it may not always be something that has been paid for by the customer, so it's not unusual that people wouldn't do that. When we look at hearing protection equipment, advice on the under or over protection of the hearing protection equipment, more than half of the reports were including that, and again, that's really encouraging, and we would definitely encourage you as consultants to be able to give that sort of advice. If you think there might be an overprotection issue, we would really like that to be brought out. Why? Because when we went and looked at the sites, all of the sites that we went to, we found that employers were not checking audibility when issuing hearing protection to workers. That 95% of the sites we went to, they really weren't being told, oh, you might not hear that reverse alarm. So that's a real, genuine safety risk, and we have investigated fatalities where that's been an issue. So if you're seeing that, please make the duty holder aware that this is something that they need to do. In terms of what they need to do, we're not looking for massive amounts of information or fabulous calculations. Really, it can be something as simple as, right, get them to put their hearing protection on and check that they can hear the reversing alarm, or check that they can hear the warning alarm on the machine. That, and noting down that they should be enough for the duty holder to do. You don't necessarily have to do it as a consultant, but the duty holder really should be doing it. When we look at controls, we were finding that somewhere between 65 and 70% of the overall information on control was poor. Again, sometimes this isn't something that's asked for, but we were finding that one thing that wasn't happening was a priority list of noise controls. We as HSE have been asking duty holders that they should really have that. This coming inspection year, we will be checking to see if duty holders have had that, particularly or specifically on the sites that we were at that were classified as poor performers. We will be coming back to check on that. That is a really useful thing to be telling your clients, get a priority list of controls. What would that look like? It really doesn't have to be much more than just a very simple table or a simple list of what they can do now, what they could do in the short term, and what they can maybe do in the long term. And I'll give you three simple ones that you could put on any control list. Number one is, are you maintaining your consumables? If you're using power tools that have got a cutting edge on them, saws, that type of thing, or even grinders and sanders, have they got a good supply of new ones? That'd be one control measure. Second control measure would be, are you following the maintenance practices for that particular power tool or that particular piece of machinery? And then the third one would be, have you got a buy quiet scheme? So when we look at advice on practicability, we were seeing very little information on that. That isn't too much of a surprise, again, because, well, if you're advising that someone does something, you would hope that it would be practicable. But it is worth looking at, it is worth considering. Employers will ensure that risks from exposure to his employees from noise is not either limited at source or where it's not reasonably practical, reduced to as low as reasonably practicable. And it's always worthwhile trying to see whether or not, am I suggesting that they do something which is going to be prohibitively expensive, or are they going to try and do something that might be overly expensive and not do that? Or if you get pushback on very simple things like following the maintenance schedule given in the manufacturer's supply information, these are the sorts of things that you could give them more advice on. When it comes to buy quiet, we are seeing about 42% of people giving advice on that. It's a really simple thing to do and add into a report. You really don't have to do a lot more than give them a link to the HSE's guidance on this. If you want to discuss it with them, buy quiet for us is effectively whatever you're using just now. When you naturally come to replace it, so we don't expect people to throw out brand new, perfectly serviceable equipment and machinery and tools, but when they naturally come to replace it, can they get something which does the job just as well, and if not, quieter? Proof on how to maintain or use controls. We saw no reports that had calculations on the noise control measures that were being introduced. Now, I know it's not easy to figure out what the likely exposure is going to be in a whole working area, and then try and give a calculation for that if you've suggested 3 or 4 controls. We would have thought that maybe there'd be the odd thing that would be like, oh, well, we're going to put in compressed air nozzles and that should reduce the noise by 5 dB on that nozzle. But no one's really given that sort of information, sticking their neck out on that. Advice on maintenance and machinery to limit the noise. How would you keep something which you're put in place to maintain it? We're seeing, just under half of the reports were including that information. And that to me is kind of low-hanging fruit. It's something that we could suggest. When it comes to health surveillance and information instruction and training, we're finding, about 60% of them are, of the advice, and that is not good. Again, some of this is because maybe they're not asking you for it, or you've not been quoted. You're not quoting to give that. But there's a 50-50 good level of information on who needs health surveillance. We're not looking for a list of names, but certainly something that would say, well, this is an area where you've got hearing protection zones, mandatory hearing protection. The people who work here, you should be considering health surveillance for these individuals. What we are finding quite good is advice if training is needed on hearing protection, more than almost 3/4 there on that. Advice if training is needed on noise risk or training advice is given in the report. Again, we're seeing good numbers on that. And then advice if the training is needed for noise control or training advice. Slightly less on that. And I suspect that is a decision that's made by the duty holder themselves. They're either deciding to do the training themselves or they're asking a consultant to help them. So, what are the things that we could potentially do to help reduce these kind of noise risks? Is there anything that we could achieve or introduce that we'd want you to start thinking about doing? Well, yes, there are. The first thing that I would ask is that if you are doing workplace noise reports, check against this web address. So this is on the UK Hearing Conservation website. It's also, I think BOHS have also got a copy of it. And it's effectively a list of questions that essentially a duty holder can ask a consultant. And if they answer yes to those questions, then they're probably going to give a good report. The reason why I'm saying if you're doing workplace noise reports to check that you yourself against this is really so that you've got something that you could potentially give to a customer who's asked for a quote and then never comes back to you. That at least they've got something that says, yes, I can do that work correctly. And if you're going to go for somebody cheaper, then you should probably ask them the same questions here, because if they're not answering yes to the same questions I am, then they're probably not going to provide you with a decent service. But my primary goal at the moment is to try and reduce the number of people in the marketplace who are providing workplace noise reports who are really bad. So anything you can do to demonstrate that you're doing the right thing is going to help you with that. If you're not doing workplace noise reports, then again, we'd ask you to check this out and send this to people. If someone phones you up and says, could you do a noise survey for me? And you say, no, we don't do that sort of thing, then please direct them to that link, because I want those duty holders to ask the right questions so they go to the right person. It sort of avoids expecting you to advise or recommend somebody, and it gives them information that they can use again and again. As I say, the thing that I'm trying to do is get rid of that red column, because that's where most of our issues seem to be. And if we can start to remove that from the market, then hopefully it starts to become a more viable space, certainly a more financially viable space for people like yourselves to operate in. If you're doing workplace noise reports, again, I would advocate you check the template for workplace noise surveys. And I'll say it again, we're not looking for you to to try and emulate this word for word. It is have a look at it. Are you doing the things that are in there? Particularly if people are asking you for a full report. And if you are, then you can take comfort that you're doing the right thing. And if you're not, then please try and update your reports to include the areas that are in there. I'd also really ask folk to have a look at the control case study web pages. We did some presentations last year to over 1,000 people, and we found that only 11% of the people who attended a course on workplace noise and vibration knew that we had case studies. So I think the level of awareness that HSE does this sort of thing and this sort of things there is pretty low. I think the level of awareness in industry that the things that are in our case studies are what we consider to be reasonably practicable. I think the awareness of that is low. So please have a look at it. I know doesn't cover everything. Some of them are very old. However, some of the things that are very old are still not being done. Or what would I specifically say that's very old and not being done? Well, PM 56, the guidance on pneumatic systems. Have a look at that. Why am I telling you to have a look at that? Well, we've been telling folk since 1985 that they should be doing this. They should be putting nozzles on their compressed air guns. I know most of the OHS members don't like or would try to avoid having duty holders using them because there's all sorts of issues with metalworking fluids and such like. But if they are using them, then please reference this. We will have our inspectors out this year, and they will be asking duty holders when they see compressed air blow-down guns, have they introduced these types of things? They'll initially be looking to see if they can be eliminated for use, and if they can't, then they will be making sure that those controls are in place. So have a look at that. It's going to be part of the inspection plan for the coming 12 months. So please be aware that that's something that HSE inspectors are going to be asking for and looking for. Tell duty holders about the Buy Quiet scheme. I think we've kind of explained that before, but it's a really simple thing that we want most people to do. Really, we would like you to check, or like the duty holders rather, to check that they can still hear audible signals when they're wearing that hearing protection. We were really concerned about the fact that 95% of the sites we went to were not doing that, where they had a noise problem and they were using hearing protection. So if you're seeing that, make sure that you're making your customers aware that this is a safety issue. And again, our inspectors will be asking about this. They will continue to ask about this because the numbers are so bad on it that we feel that any difference, any movement we can get on it would make a significant difference to the likelihood of people being injured. If you're interested in doing this, but you're not doing it already, then we would really ask you to consider getting some training. And BOHS runs a pretty good training course on this. IOA one, I think, there's parity between the two courses. If you are interested in seeing what we're specifically talking about just now, there will be an event on the 23rd of March. It's open to all consultants and it's about improving noise reports. I think we've got about 600 people coming to that. Initially, we were just going to limit it to the organisations who we had looked at their reports or gathered the reports in and speaking to them. But actually, we decided just to open it up to everybody to see if we can get improvements across the piece. So please, if you're interested in getting a bit of information and training on that, then please attend this webinar. I was also speaking to BOHS earlier this week, or end of last week, about the possibility of having some sort of annual or biannual training material that we can provide for you. So we're going to be looking into that and we'll keep you posted on what's happening with that. So who's doing workplace noise surveys? Well, we found out that more than half of the surveys being done were being done by people who don't seem to be affiliated with any professional association, and that is not something that is a good position to be in, particularly given that they make up for the bulk of the poor reports that we're seeing. What's wrong with the reports that we're seeing? Well, it's across the piece. It's pretty much every sort of issue that you might think, from measurement to advice on control to assessing the risk and giving information as to whether people are above or below exposure action levels. And those 8 things that we want you to do, they centre round about what is coming up in next year's inspection plan, and they centre round about the information that we've already provided to BUHS and worked with BUHS to provide to make sure that you understand what HSE is looking for. I'm going to finish up just by giving you a bit of an overview on what is going to be coming in the next year. So this is 26 to 27. We will be starting in April. There's an expectation that we will focus our inspections on noise around about the food and drink industry, the waste and recycling industry, and the rubber and plastics industry. So if these are the people that you are working with, if these make up your clients or you work in this area, then please make them aware that there will be questions asked by our inspectors on noise. The inspectors will still carry out looking at noise in other areas like construction when they see it as a matter of evident concern, or if they see those specific issues that we've addressed before, which fall into the realms of compressed air, audibility, and then the quality of hearing protection. But that is what is going to be happening over the coming year. And I will finish with this slide, because if you are someone that's working in the food and drink, rubber and plastics, or the waste and recycling industry, and you want someone like myself to come and speak to your industry or your industry association or groups of people that are in that sector about the inspection plan, then I'm more than happy to do that. But usually you should be aware by now that when I put this slide up, it's a pretty clear indication that I am at the end of my talk. So if you have any questions, now is the time to ask.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. I've just been monitoring the chat box while you've been talking there, and I believe we did have a question. So we've got a question here that says, have HSE taken enforcement against the noise consultants providing very poor noise assessments?
Yes, we have. Couple of things. We will be going out. We've got an inspection plan set up that will start in April. We will be going out, the noise inspectors specifically, they go and do actual inspection visits on consultants. So that is coming. I suspect that you can probably assume that it's not necessarily going to be BUHS members that we're going to be coming at. It will be the ones that were in that red pile of unqualified or unfailure to issue information on qualifications. So that will be happening this coming year. In terms of enforcement against existing inspectors, we have done existing consultants. We have done that. That has been happening. The thing that you might be wondering, and this is a question we get a lot, is, well, if you're taking enforcement against people, how come they're not getting taken to court? That isn't necessarily how we issue all of our enforcement. If we're going to court, things have gone really, really badly wrong. That's not to say we haven't taken a consultant to court for I think it was noise and other occupational health issues. But a lot of our enforcement centres around, effectively, we contact that organisation, we have a look at the other reports that they're providing to see that the report we've got wasn't just a one-off poor example. And if there's multiple examples of poor practice, then we are in a situation where we may issue written enforcement. If it's at a level below that, then we would potentially issue or give verbal advice. But one of the things that we have been actively doing, and I've actively been doing, is saying to organisations, look, you really shouldn't be doing this. You need to either make a decision that you should get competent, or when your customers ask you to do this work, you either say no or recommend somebody else. And in the vast majority of cases where we've come across that, we have persuaded the consultant to stop doing the work or become competent. In fact, the vast majority of them have said that they committed to not doing the work.
Excellent, thank you. We do have a couple of more questions. So we've got one here that says, with respect to qualifications, would you expect to see a certificate included, or just consultant name and a statement of associated relevant qualifications?
I'm not looking for that. That's not something that we would look for in the report. I think what we would look for is that, yes, well, to be honest with you, that you've put your name on it. A lot of the reports don't even have the name of the person who's written it, maybe just the company. So who you are and your qualifications, your degree qualifications and your affiliation for your professional association, we would not expect you to have to include a copy of your qualifications, not least because there's nothing to stop somebody having to go and pinching that and that sort of type of thing. So yeah, we're not looking for you to have that kind of level of detail. Another thing maybe to be aware of is, you know, I don't know if you saw there was some of the reports that were provided by people who had what was described as non-relevant qualifications. So they were a couple of reports that had been written by mechanical or electrical engineers, and actually their reports were pretty good. So it wasn't the fact that they weren't a member of a particular association, it was the fact that they've done quite a good job. So to me, it's about demonstrating first line, is this person the sort of individual who looks like they could do a good report, and that gives us some comfort, and then we look at the quality of the report itself, and the quality of the report is the main driver to giving us comfort. But as you've seen before, most of the poor reports have come from people with no qualifications whatsoever.
Excellent. Hopefully that answers your question there. And then we've had one more through for now. Keep them coming in while Chris is speaking. Oh, there you go. You've listened. There's two just come in as I've said that. So the one at the top at the moment is the HSM event on 23rd of March worth duty holders registering for, or is it really targeting consultants only?
It's targeted at consultants only. You know, I don't need to make it clear that what we expect from somebody that is charging to do a noise survey is quite different to what we would expect the duty holder themselves to produce. And so if I go in and do an inspection at a work site where the duty holder has taken it upon themselves to assess their own risk for noise, what I'm looking for is information that will come from several sources within that organisation, from different people and different documents, that type of thing. This is about paying for someone to come in and give you advice, and really my expectation, and I will say my expectation, is that if someone's going to charge a business to do work for them, then I would expect that work to be done at a higher level than what they could have done themselves. So it's very much aimed at consultants, that report. I wouldn't want duty holders to come to that because it might confuse them into thinking, oh, they have to provide this level of detail. No, we look for slightly different things. We look for them to get advice, competent advice where they need it. But the specifics of writing a workplace noise survey report is the sort of thing where we would expect people to give a load of information in one document and what is expected.
I don't know if you've got the ability to look at the chat for this next one. It's a bit of a longer one, but I'll read it out just for anybody who might be able to see it.
Guidance moves towards robust reasons to Is the HSE guidance applies to these statistical compliances? No, I don't know. I don't know if we are. I cannot say if we are or not. I think this is a question specifically about it's not about chemicals, is it? I think this is about I just get a chat. I think this is a question about autotoxins, is it? Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what that is about. If it is about, if you maybe just put another comment in, say chat, that might be helpful. But if it is about autotoxins, then we are currently looking at developing a more comprehensive list for that, with the intention of posting that up on our web pages. Whether or not that is the sort of thing that we would look at in terms of exposure action values, I don't think.
Thank you. We've got the next one there. Are there any laws in place to guide and ensure organisations employ qualified IH personnel?
Are there any laws in place? No, I don't think there are. I mean, it's again, competency is something that HSE is across the piece. We're not prescriptive about competency, so we're happy for organisations to set up their own competency expectations, and we would reference that when we're looking at stuff. But in terms of laws for I mean, I'm only talking about workplace noise. In terms of laws for workplace noise, no, there isn't. I'll just read the next one. Are the quality of noise surveys being seen by HSE improving generally? Yeah, we are seeing some improvement in it, and I think that's part and parcel of having actions like this, talking to people in this way. The reason why we're doing this is, yes, we thought there was some issues with it, and that's been borne out in the statistics that we're getting back from Science Division. But the kernel, the thing that started off was some work that the Environment Agency did on environmental noise reports, and they found that they were poor. But they also found that by telling consultants this is what HSE's or this is what the government's expectations are, then the quality of the reports changed quite dramatically in quite a short period of time. I think the quality went up significantly within a 6 month period. So I'm really hoping that by telling you this is what we're looking for, these are the issues that we're finding, telling you to have a look at that template report and mapping it onto what you're doing, that we'll start to see a rise in quality. But the other thing is trying to remove people from the industry that probably, if you're going out and using a mobile phone and you've got no experience and that type of thing, trying to persuade those people to not be in this sector is going to be key. What would be your key points to consultants to be able to provide excellent report services to their clients? Well, the key thing, again, keep coming back to that template report. If you can do the things that are in that template report, it gives different levels of your ability. Then, maybe you're just giving some basic information on numbers, and that might be worthwhile. You make that clear, because sometimes duty holders think they should be getting a lot more than what they actually are prepared to pay for. But anything that maps onto that would be good. Anything that indicates to us that you've got competencies round about it, again, is the sort of thing that we'll be looking for and what the customer should be looking for. So that would be it. If you want to get key points, then I think having a look at the buyer's guide, how to find a good consultant, the questions that are asked in there, particularly the green ones. So green are the base expectations, and amber are the you're a higher level of consultancy practitioner. If you're fitting in with that, then you're probably likely to be able to provide an excellent report. Are you checking calibration status of consultant sound level meters? Yeah, we will be. We will be checking to make sure that these things are in calibration. Obviously, there are some other questions that we have around about calibration that we're going to be asking, but it isn't necessarily to you as an end user. It would potentially be to the calibration services organisations. Can you provide contact details of institutions that offer short training courses on noise and vibration? Well, yes, DOHS does one. I think if you go and have a look at their webpage, they've got one there. I suspect for most DOHS members, you're probably aware of that, and also the fact that it fits into a wider training regimen to get you up to competency for being an occupational hygienist. And I think that's probably the sort of thing that I would hope people that are in this sort of area are looking at doing, that they're trying to get to a competent level to know how to do the measurement practice, know how to assess the risk, and also know when and where to give advice on control. And then we've got a last question here. If the type of situation arises where noise control required doesn't fall under the case studies provided in HSE document, where would be the best source of educate consultants on different noise control examples? Right. So the case study stuff is what we would consider to be reasonably practicable. And so your first point of call with that is to check. So say you're working in waste and recycling, you would check to see what the case studies, if any, there are on noise control, because those are the things HSE specifically looks for. And that's what we can issue enforcement around about. If you want to get better advice and better information on how to, on other examples of noise control, there are a lot of different areas where you can look at that. There's different websites you can look at. A lot of that's going to fall round about the manufacturers and the providers of these systems. And it's going to be something that you're just going to have to try and find. If you want to get a better idea of how to figure out where the noise is coming from and how to try and control that noise and deal with that noise, well, Bull & Care have got quite a decent little book on noise control, which is on a PDF version that you can get online. And I do believe some of the universities also run training courses on noise assessment and understanding it. And the IOE diploma would help you with that if you want to understand the basic principles behind noise control. Right, and then are metal working fluids thought of as an autotoxin? I'm going to say I don't know. I'm the list we have at the moment is very limited. The occupational health scientists at Science Division are currently looking at developing a more comprehensive list that we can issue to people. And the reason why I'm saying I don't know if metal working fluids fall into autotoxin is because I'm waiting for that list before I can say what are the materials that we would describe as autotoxins. I mean, there are some obvious ones like toluene and that type of thing, which obviously isn't for metal working fluids. But I don't want to be drawn on that until I've got a list that we can come back and tell you about. Surely that's got to be the end of it, isn't it?
So I think you can breathe now.
Surely they must have had enough by now.
But there is
Oh,
a hand up if you're okay to. Oh,
yes, of course,
feel
yes.
free to come off mute there, Sarah, if you do want to. Don't know if that was an accidental click.
No, my mistake. Sorry, Chris. You're free.
Oh, oh, thanks.
Well, with that, I think, yeah, maybe we'll draw it to a close, give everybody 18 minutes of their Friday afternoon back. So thank you so much for all the information, Chris. Thank you for the presentation. Like I say, this has been recorded and should be up on the BOHS YouTube channel within the hour, I'd say. I've put the link into the chat box just in case you did want to spend your weekend looking at all the brilliant BOHS webinars that we've put up over the last 5 or 6 years. And just to mention that the UK Hearing Conservation Association conference will be in early November this year. So we're just putting all of the information towards that, and keep an eye on the BOHS event site for more information as the year rolls on. So if there's nothing else from you, Chris, I'm happy to leave it to you rest of your Friday, and thank you once more.
Yeah, thanks very much, everybody. Bye.